Hello, and welcome to this third installment of How I Read. This is how I read the Gekiga of Yoshihiro Tatsumi. His works have generally been published through Drawn and Quarterly. Yoshihiro Tatsumi is a respected Japanese comic artist. He passed away at the age of 79 in 2015. One of his claims to fame is he coined the term Gekiga, which means dramatic picture, more or less. And this was to differentiate it from manga, which is basically cartoons. The word manga in English specifically means Japanese comics, but in Japan, manga, the word, is much older than modern comics, and he wanted to differentiate his work from that. He was also a contributor to the magazine Kage, which is the Japanese word for shadow. This was an anthology magazine that was aimed at mature readers, one of, if not the first. Most manga was considered family-friendly entertainment, often children's entertainment at that time. He was also a regular contributor to the magazine Garo, an alternative manga anthology that ran from the 60s to 2002. I think the story that I'm going to look at in this episode was a Garo story. I'm not sure, but I think so. So, Tatsumi, if I were to say what his themes were, he was living and working in the post-war Japanese period, which was a time of massive change in Japan. It became a lot more westernized, and a lot of the tradition and social structure of the past was fraying. He was born in Osaka, but he was living in Tokyo in this period. And a lot of his comics are about people who can't find themselves in this new society. Sometimes the women are hostesses, something that reflects the lower class and the lack of opportunities for women in the period. Sometimes his male protagonists, they don't even speak in the comic. They just make faces and they make one or two distinct actions to justify them as the protagonist. But they are essentially silent protagonists. This is the quintessential Tatsumi image, a person in the crowd completely feeling despondent or alienated. There's often an impotence in the characters. Not necessarily in bed, though that could be there, but in their life, in terms of opportunity or self-realization. He's not writing about people who have it together, which is to say, the majority who are keeping afloat on the currents of the present moment. He does a really great job of capturing the feel of Tokyo circa 1970, particularly the lower class. I read what millennials write on Reddit, even some Zoomers, I guess, younger people today who hate the work available, who feel like cogs in the machine, who are working so hard for next to nothing and can't see the light at the end of the tunnel. They feel like they don't even know what they're looking for at this point. This is what the tone of Tatsumi's 60s and 70s comics are. And personally, when I was in my 20s, I felt identical. This stuff, the world hasn't changed that much. The clothing and the styles and the technology has changed, but there's a specific flavor of dehumanization in the modern world. I suppose the world's always been this way, but he's really tapping into the 20th century expression of it. This is the entirety of the works available in English at this point, plus some things that were in anthologies here and there. The earliest is Black Blizzard, which is slightly more conventional compared to his other work. It's more of a genre piece, but it's a genre piece aimed at adults. Then we have the three books from Drawn and Quarterly, The Pushman, Abandon the Old in Tokyo, and Goodbye. And those are from 69 to 72. These are collections of short stories about 10 to 20 pages long. Midnight Fisherman is published by a Singaporean company called Landmark Books. In the introduction, it acknowledges those three books that were published by Drawn and Quarterly, and it aimed to continue that and share more of his 70s work. In 2008, we have A Drifting Life, which is his autobiography. This was an Eisner winner in the West and a Tezuka Award winner in Japan. In the last years of his life, he got a lot of credit for all his work, thankfully. Fallen Words is based on rakugo, which is traditional Japanese storytelling. It's kind of like folk tales. And then this last book is called Goodbye and Other Stories, and this was the first ever English printing of his work. This is a book that was published in the late 80s, but a lot of the stories in here are overlapped in the 3 drawn and quarterly volumes. So if you're an essentialist, don't feel like you need to get that. If I had to say what you should have, these 3 books from Drawn and Quarterly, available in hardcover and paperback. The 3 ones from the 60s and 70s are his peak fiction, the stuff that really resonated with me. If you like Adrian Tomine, he was deeply influenced by these. It's very mature fiction. Drifting Life, as a work of writing, it's not quite as stylistically interesting. It's not quite as constructed, but it's an autobiography. What it gives you is this really wonderful look into what Japan was like in the 1950s, what the manga scene was like, and you get to see university-age Tezuka and the lifestyle of a comic artist of that time. We're really lucky to have this massive 800-page book. These 4 books are pillars of a good comic collection. When I see these in someone's shelfie photo, I nod approvingly. So this book, Goodbye, I'm going to take a story from this book for the video. And I bought this sometime in the early 90s at the Beguiling in Toronto. It was recommended to me and I read through it 4 or 5 times. Almost everything in it was a punch in the gut. I loved it. The story around this book, as I remember it, and this could be a little embellished because it's a 30-year-old anecdote, Catalan is a Spanish company, and they got the Spanish language rights to print some of Tatsumi's work. And while they were at it, they said, no, we could sell this in English. So they decided to print an English one, and this caused a little bit of friction because they were not licensed to publish it in English. So this book shouldn't really exist. I want to take a look at the story just passing through. This has never been published elsewhere in English to my knowledge, and so unless you have this book, you probably have not read this story. It's a very, very interesting story. It stands out from his regular work for 2 reasons. One, it's not specifically lower class. It's more of a middle class seeming story. It takes place in a nice house. And the second reason is it's actually pretty uplifting. I find it a very positive story. It's best to read the story for yourself before I talk about it, because then you can have some of your own opinions before I get into mine. So I'm going to share the entirety of the story. I'm going to put it on the screen for 2 seconds at a time. So read these comics as they were meant to on a YouTube screen. You see the 2 pages, hit pause with your spacebar, read the pages, unpause, go to the next page, pause, and read it, and so on. 16 pages total, very short. 16 pages including this image. And possibly some kind person will put a PDF of this in the comments section so that you will, if you want to, just download the PDF and you can read it a little bit more comfortably. I'm not going to do that myself. Some nice person is going to do that for us, fingers crossed. If you don't feel the need to read it in advance, just sit tight. So I'm going to press play now. Please pause every 2 seconds so you can read it, unless you have downloaded the PDF. I'll be back in 16 seconds and we'll bookmark the video where it continues. Okay, and we are back. And so before we get into the analysis of this story, coincidentally, just a couple weeks ago, as I was preparing this video, I found this book, Masterpiece Collection of Yoshihiro Tatsumi. It's a collection from the year 2014, in Japanese, that is, and I wanted to throw this into the video. As a quick aside, I came across this book at this place called the Tenjinyama Art Studio in Sapporo. I live in Sapporo. If you are an artist, Tenjinyama has art residencies. You can live in Japan, in Sapporo, for as little as $3 a day for up to 90 days, on the condition that you are producing art on a regular basis and you present your art to those in residence. It's a slightly academic sort of activity, but this is a place for artists to meet. I was introduced to the place by a French comic maker who was staying there as a residency. When I was at this place, I met people from Hungary, from Netherlands, from Australia, from across Japan. So Google it if you're the type of person who has time on your hands and you want to live in Japan for a couple of months. This is a really cool place, great opportunity, and this book is on their lobby's bookshelf. Yeah, check it out. Anyway, so this book happened to have this story in it in the original Japanese. And sometimes I'll hear people talk about westernized manga. Oh, they butchered this print and they ripped this apart. Partially because manga in English, they used to flip the pages to make it easier to read for Western readers. So I wanted to briefly compare what it looks like in the original condition. So this is the shot of the same spread. On the left is my book, and on the right is from the Japanese version. The words, the Japanese words are a big hint in this case. And first of all, you can tell that they didn't have the original art for this. You can really see the grays look much worse on the underside of the roof of the house. All the detailing on the cabinet doors, it's really choppy. So yeah, there's some deterioration of the art for sure. Not enough to make the art not readable, but it's worse. And they didn't flip the page, though. It's the same way. On the other page, we see like this. They have flipped 5 of the panels, and then they left the one panel the same. I guess it was just for the reading flow of the information of the panel. They felt it read better right to left. But then they changed the calendar from 1972 to 1977. That's kind of strange. And you can even notice with this panel, because they had to cut the panel out somewhere, it got resized. And the size of the panel is not quite uniform. On the bottom right, you can see it isn't level with the next panel. So thank you, Drawn and Quarterly and Kodansha, all the Western manga publishers for the last 20 years who have worked really hard to preserve the quality of the originals in their reprints. That's just food for thought. In the old days, yes, they did butcher the art just a little bit. Now, you know. And so this is just passing through. His short stories usually have a really beautiful cover page. Like every story has its own cover. The picture ended up being the cover of this book. This is a nice setup for the story. We see this lady Kyoko who is coming home after a long time away. It's very explicit. She's coming back after 2 years away from her husband, and her husband has come to meet her. And she's straight up saying, I don't miss the house. I just feel like going home. That's it. She's visiting. There's a weird mood between the two of them. She apologizes, and he doesn't see a need to forgive her. This could be kindness on his part, but considering how the story develops, it can be said to establish his character. Now here we see the pages we just saw. She comes back in the house and she's being welcomed in. This page on the right is a great story craft. She's been welcomed back by the husband. He establishes that nothing has changed. And if you've read through the story, you realize that this calendar is very important to the story. It's not quite Chekhov's calendar because anyone who looks at it does not expect it to be relevant to the story whatsoever, but it is incredibly relevant. What I love about this is Tatsumi nestled the unchanged calendar in with the unchanged clock, the unchanged tea, and embroidery. And so it doesn't stand out as something that we have to remember. It just reads as background details. I think this is respect for the reader. He's not smashing you in the face with this calendar, which is so important to the plot. On the next page, you see the mother-in-law coming in. Kyoko calls her mom. That's kind of a Japanese thing. You call your in-laws mom and dad. And this is a really interesting scene. She's a better cook than you, Mama. Oh, it's such a long time since we tasted Kyoko's cooking. It's very kind, but, is it really kind? They're being kind about the work they're expecting her to do in the house, having been home a day. They may as well compliment her on her dishwashing skills. On the next page, though, we have a second key sequence. These 2 years you've been away, your mother, the house, everything's just like before. As she's thinking about the 2 years she was away. He says, forget about them. You just went for a walk that lasted 2 years. That becomes an important expression that her time away was just a walk that lasted 2 years. And then we come back to her being integrated into the house, and she's already making breakfast because that's her job. And a lovely, lovely sequence here. The mom is slurping, the husband is slurping. The next page, together, they are slurping, and Kyoko realizes she's barely even there. Then we have this nice big panel which duplicates the sensation of the previous one, but lets us take in what she's experiencing. So this is just good storytelling. Good job. She's left alone in the daytime, and she's back to being a housewife. Here, she explicitly realizes time stopped in her house when she left, as if those 2 years hadn't existed. We see again, the husband has pretended her experience was nothing. The use of the calendar here is a coup on Tatsumi's part. You know, the calendar is going to come back at the climax of the story, but here he's using it as a plot device to trigger this flashback. We get to see that one day she was out and just left. She took a job. She didn't want to go home. She was poor, but it was her life. It was her experience. And now she's back in the room, and she's realizing that being in the house as it is now, unchanged, her experience loses its reality. So the calendar that had not been changed in the 2 years, she rips it apart. This is, again, a lovely sequence. We see the days coming apart. I think it's quite affecting storytelling here. So I'm going to be a little bit sacrilegious on this page here. These two top panels on the upper left where she says, I understood, Stan, my husband, never forgave me. I think everything in this story is incredibly modern in its storytelling. It holds up. I think this is probably the weak part. If I were to change anything, I would wipe out those words. I don't think she needs to say it explicitly. I think that the story would have been a pinch more powerful if she didn't say it. That's the one thing I would change in the story. That is a small quibble. But at the end of it, she's back on the train, and this is just a victorious little phrase. A little walk, that's all my life with him was. Her husband tried to say that her time away from him was just a walk, and she's going to say, you know what? My time with him was just a walk. But she's not even going to tell him. She just left. This is just a boss move on Kyoko's part. I'm so happy for her. She is not going to be taken down by this man. On the last page, the mother doesn't get it. And the husband, last thing, no, don't touch anything. He has learned nothing. His wife was unhappy and he didn't understand what the problem was whatsoever, and he is just going to try and freeze everything in time rather than accepting any of it. So that is just passing through. And at the time, this was my favorite story in the book, and I guess it was because it's a very true human interaction. A partner tries to control the other, and that person escapes, and it's all done in a tight 15 pages plus cover. The calendar is used so well. It's dropped in at the start, so it's established, but it's not obvious about it. It is then used to propel the story. And then it's also used as a dominant metaphor of the story. The unchanged calendar reflects her husband's attempt to negate her autonomy, more or less. By ripping the calendar apart, she is ripping apart the stasis that her husband is trying to impose on her. Tatsumi has created a metaphor. The 2 years, we have the husband negating them by labeling them a walk. We have her realizing that he has negated them. And then we have her turning that around and not even throwing it in his face because she's not going to bother telling him. She understands his framing of her experience as a walk, and she's going to turn it around on him. That is a tight, tight story with an emotional resolution, and I don't think mainstream writers have the time and energy to write something like that every single month, not for years, especially not if they're writing multiple titles. Sure, maybe Alan Moore could do it at a certain point in his career, but I'm speaking in generalities here, not some hard rules of the industry. And I'm thrilled when mainstream writers have emotionally complicated work. I have such a respect for what Tatsumi was doing because he knew he didn't want to do mainstream manga. In his autobiography, A Drifting Life, we have him under the name Hiroshi, but this is Tatsumi, and he's got the Shakespeare, he's got the Dostoevsky. He has ambitions to make something good, not something you just buy and read and move on to the next. I think he wants to make something that is worth considering, that stays with you. It'll be manga that isn't manga. What a great phrase. And there's a greater one coming up. Here we have him being chastised by his older brother. Manga is a business. You can't treat it as a hobby. Work made for self-satisfaction won't sell. Spot the lie. That is 100% true. It won't sell. My understanding is that Tatsumi was not a wealthy man, but he had ambitions to make something great. He's using the manga methodology to articulate something entirely new. Here we have him working on a magazine, and he's asking the publisher, please don't put manga on the label. He doesn't want it to be called manga. Eventually, a unique anti-manga manga technique will be developed. His entire concern was mapping new territory. He could just not stand to be in the shadow of some other creators. And so if I want to talk about what's really great about Tatsumi, I keep thinking pretentious, pretentious, pretentious. And pretentious is a negative word, so I can't use it. I looked up what is a synonym for pretentious with a positive meaning. I had to settle on the value of artistic goals. And I guess it works because if I just say ambition, ambition could be to be a professional, the ambition to have your own monthly book. Ambition could be a lot of things. His ambition was to make manga that wasn't manga, as he knew it. He really wanted to make the new thing in a new style. He coined a new genre name for his work so it wouldn't be confused with the mainstream. His goal was to make comics that didn't exist in the market. And his comics, they aimed to fulfill something beyond sales figures. He had a very emotional target with what he was doing. Lastly, these are comics that measure their success beyond simple numbers. Of course, he wanted sales and readers, but he didn't change his artistic voice in order to get them. He could have made a fine living pumping out mainstream work. All of these statements, by some, they would be labeled pretentious. But here I am, at age 50, analyzing a comic story that was written before I was born by a guy not here to pump out social media content to promote his stuff. That is incredible success by my terms. And of course, we do this for Jack Kirby and Stan Lee, and there's a lot of mainstream that gets analyzed long after it's left newsstands. And yeah, that stuff's good too. It's all good, it's not bad. This is just a different kind of good, and if you're an artist and you want to be the next mainstream hit machine, get in line. There are thousands like you. Tatsumi represents the unbeaten path. That is how I read the Gekiga of Yoshihiro Tatsumi. I haven't done this in previous videos, but I make comics myself, and so I'm going to throw a tag on at the end of the video. My work is nothing like Tatsumi. My new book is The Blossoming City Sakumachi. This is a good vibes book about urban space and gardening. It's melancholic yet positive. It's made up of short vignettes, all drawn in different styles. Nobody's paying me to make this. I'm trying to make something for me. Because I read Yoshihiro Tatsumi when I was 22 and I never fully recovered. So why would I waste my time making something that someone else is doing? I'll put a link in the notes if you're curious, or if you're a Western publisher interested in losing money on my comics. Read more comics, make more comics. Thank you.